and welcome back to my channel. As you can probably tell, today I'm doing something a little bit different. It's the lead up to Christmas and I've looked into cases that actually occurred around Christmas. Today's case is going to be the unsolved murder of JonBenét Ramsey. This case has actually been unsolved for 24 years. And although it did receive this nationwide and national-wide kind of news media, and it's been in the news for so many years, and it gained so much attention, it still remains unsolved. I'm sure many of you guys will have actually heard of this case. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect to anyone I'm going to talk about. I've simply gathered the information off the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born on the 6th of August in 1990 to her parents Patricia Ramsey and JonBenét Ramsey. Patricia was very commonly known as Patsy, so that's how I'm going to refer to her in this video, because that's how she was very well known and that's what everyone called her. JonBenét was actually born in Atlanta in Georgia in the US. She also had an older brother called Burke Ramsey. She was 6 and he was 9 at the time of this case occurring. JonBenét's name actually came from both of her parents, so like I said, her father was called JonBenét and that's where they got JonBenét from. They just combined it and made it shorter, I guess. And her middle name was Patricia, which is what her mother's name was. Didn't really understand that, in all honesty, because they had a son, a firstborn son. Usually you name your firstborn son after the father if that's kind of the route that you want to go along. But instead they named their second-born daughter, combining their father's 2 names and her name. So they used both of their names to make her name. I did find that really odd, but I really do believe that JonBenét was kind of the apple of their eye. JonBenét was actually a little pageant girl. Her mother used to be a former beauty queen and had entered her into like a series of child beauty pageants, and she did really well in them. She earned a few different titles. She was America's Royal Miss, Little Miss Chevrolet, Little Miss Colorado, Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. So like I said, she did really well. At the age of 4, that's when she won her first title, and then obviously she continued to win up until the age of 6. But those were just the ones that she won. So if you really think about it, how many did she actually enter within that space of time? She probably entered so many competitions, and like I said, we only were aware about the ones that she actually won. In my eyes, that's a lot for a little 6-year-old girl. They would have spent all this time traveling, and she would have spent all this time in makeup and dressed up and practicing her routines and things like that. And personally, at least, I don't think that would have been much fun for a little 6-year-old girl. But hey, I'm not one to say that pageants are terrible and things like that. It's just not something personally I believe, but that's just my opinion. So please don't take me as calling a mother for that, because I'm really not trying to do that. It seems like when she wasn't kind of all made up and dolled up, she was this fun-loving little girl who would love to get dirty and jump in this kind of pile of leaves that she had outside. She just loved to go and dive into it. She just really enjoyed having fun and things like that. I do believe that John didn't really believe in the pageant kind of life for his child, but at the same sense, he was a businessman, and he was a very successful businessman at that. The Ramseys were very wealthy people. They were very influential, and that was kind of his domain. So he would bring in the money and deal with business and things like that, and he was always at work a lot. And Patsy would deal with the home life, and I guess he thought that pageants and things came under the home life. As I said, they were very wealthy. They lived in this beautiful big house in this beautiful neighborhood, and they were just this well-known family in their community. JonBenét was only 6 years old when she was murdered, and during this video I'll tell you the circumstances surrounding it and the theories and the evidence that people have on this case. So on the 25th of December in 1996, which was Christmas night, the Ramsey family, went over to their very good friend's house for this party, and it was the White House, which was owned by Priscilla and Fleet White. Now, by all accounts, they enjoyed the night, and on the way home, JonBenét fell asleep in the car. That was around about 10 p.m. when they arrived home, and the Ramseys said that they scooped JonBenét up and took her straight to bed. That's the last we know about what happened that night, because the next morning, at around 5:52 a.m, a 911 call came through from Patsy stating that her daughter was missing and that she'd found a ransom note. So Patsy had apparently got up early that morning, really early. She came downstairs to make some coffee, and she was kind of getting ready to go on a family holiday that they'd planned for that day. The Ramseys actually owned 2 private planes and a yacht. And John was a pilot, so he would often fly them using these planes to their destinations and their holidays and things like that. So as she was heading downstairs, down a spiral staircase, she noticed this note. And when she read it, she frantically rang the police immediately. Literally minutes after putting the phone down to the police, she rang the Whites. She rang her friends and she asked them to come over so that they could support her. Let it just be known that it was reported that Burke was asleep the entire time. He only apparently woke up when the police came into his room shining a flashlight in. And that's what apparently did wake him up. When he did wake up, he was quickly removed from the house and taken to the White's household. Can I just add in here as well that Patsy was actually stated to be wearing the same clothes that she wore the previous night. And according to all the people that knew her, that was very odd for Patsy, because she was this woman who was always very well presented. She always had her makeup and her hair immaculate and her clothes. And apparently she would not be caught dead wearing the same outfit as the previous night. So could this have meant that she never actually went to bed that night? Or was there just simply another explanation for it? Had she just got into them clothes after kind of rolling out of bed? They were already there, they were already on the floor, and she just put them back on. It's just something to think about as I go through this case.
911 emergency.
Police.
What's going on?
515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was it?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey, I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay, well,
There's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy.
So as you could hear, Patsy sounded frantic on the phone, as you would be. Your daughter had just gone missing, you had this ransom note. This ransom note was lengthy, by the way. It was 2.5 pages long. It's probably the longest ransom note of history. And everyone has found that odd, to say the least, including myself. Not only that, the amount they asked for was $118,000. Now, when it was actually looked into, that was remarkably similar to the amount that John had received for his Christmas bonus the previous year. And that kind of indicated that someone knew this information. It was either somebody from the family or somebody who worked there, because it was just a very strange amount. They were millionaires. It would have been more prudent to ask for $1 million than that very, very specific amount, because they could afford it. They could have paid it. So surely if you're going to ransom the daughter and leverage her for money, you'd make it like obviously an amount that they could pay, but $1 million was something that they could pay. So why would you pick that random amount? It's just very, very weird. So the letter also had all these instructions in it, and one of the main things that it emphasized was, do not contact the police. If you do, we will execute your daughter. With this really, really heavy threat looming over them, and the fact that they could pay the ransom very easily, it was not very much money, I guess, to them because they had so much of it, they were very wealthy. And with this fear of their daughter being executed if they contacted the police, what did Patsy do? Well, she contacted the police straight away. I don't know if that's something I would have done. I know, don't get me wrong, the police need to know about these things, but they could have afforded the money. Surely they would have tried to give this person the money and follow the instructions rather than risk your daughter's death. But I get it. People react to scary situations in different ways. Anyway, like I said, the note was very strange and a lot of things in it didn't really make sense. The handwriting kind of at the beginning of the letter was different as it continued. So it was as if somebody had really tried to change their style of handwriting. And as they carried on and this note got longer and longer, that kind of faded away and it changed. It went back to more what their handwriting would actually be like. The letter also had these grammar mistakes and misspelt words in the beginning in the first paragraph once more. And then as it went on, it reverted back to normal. It was as if they were trying to make it look like English wasn't the first language. And someone was also kind of trying to change the way that they spelt words and things so that it didn't look like it was them writing the note, if you get what I mean. Professionals did actually determine that this letter was most likely to be written by a woman, with this adult woman's first language being English. So as much as they tried to attempt to make it look like English wasn't the first language, it was pretty obvious that it was. There's a lot of people out there that do in fact believe that Patsy wrote this letter, and professionals did kind of get samples off of both of them. John was ruled out straight away, he had not written the letter, but Patsy couldn't be ruled out. It was kind of undetermined, meaning that yes, she could have written the note, and it did have a lot of similarities to Patsy's handwriting. I believe 100 samples of her writing were actually taken and they found 200 similarities. Over 200 similarities, sorry. So not only that, this letter had been practiced. So they found 2 practice notes in the bin. So whoever had written this letter really wanted to get it right. They wanted it to be perfect. So they practiced it, which again is very odd. It was also written using Patsy's notepad and her pen. So say you're a kidnapper and you're in a rush to take this little girl. Surely you would have written the ransom note at home. And why did you feel the need to write it so long? A couple of paragraphs would have done. Literally, we've got your daughter, we want this much. Follow our instructions, don't contact the police. You get the idea. You don't need 2.5 pages. It was just ridiculous. And then once they had written this lengthy ransom letter, they put everything back in its place, because it was all put back in its place. And then they weren't worried about people, I don't know, going to the toilet, catching them as they sat down writing this and practicing it. CBS actually did this test where they brought in all these professionals and they had this group of people and they had them write this ransom note. But bearing in mind this was copying it, so they already knew what they were writing. Whoever wrote this had to literally sit down and think about what they were writing and then write it. And it took those professionals 20.5 minutes to write it by copying it. So this kidnapper had sat there for well over 20 minutes, at least, and wrote this note and wasn't afraid of anyone coming and finding them. Surely you would just want to get in, get out, take the child, get the money. At least I would have thought so anyway. Now let me take you back to the actual call itself. I've kind of briefly mentioned it and obviously I've played the audio tape, but there are kind of this really large speculation around the last 6 seconds of the 911 call. She didn't actually initially put the phone down straight away, and the call handler could actually hear voices and things in the background, and eventually this would be enhanced. So from the frantic Patsy being absolutely distraught that her daughter had gone missing, when she thought that she put down the phone, which she hadn't, but she thought she did, her demeanour instantly changed. She went like calm and just completely normal. And it actually really disturbed the call handler. This call handler was called Kimberly Archletter, and she actually believed that she heard Patsy say, okay, we've called the police, what do we do now? Like I said, in this different demeanour that she had when she first made the call. The enhanced recording picked up what everyone believes to be 3 voices, and Kimberly actually said that she heard a possible of 2, maybe 3 voices in the last 6 seconds as well before it was enhanced. So obviously these 3 voices would be John, Patsy, but who was the third one? Burke was supposedly asleep the entire time. but it is believed that the third one was Burke. So why would they lie about Burke being asleep if he wasn't? I will play the enhanced recording. Now, I did find it a little hard to understand, but it is widely believed that one of the voices you hear initially is a male's voice, and people believe that it sounds like John. And this person is believed to have said, "We're not speaking to you." Then you hear a woman's voice, thought to be Patsy's, which says, "Oh Jesus, what did you do?" Then it's believed that a child voice, which presumably would be Burke because there was only one child there at the time. Obviously, at this time, JonBenét was missing, so it would have been Burke, surely. But again, they said he was asleep. Regardless, they thought they heard Burke saying, "What did you find?" And then the call goes dead.
Patsy? Patsy?
Obviously, that doesn't suggest guilt. This call doesn't suggest guilt at all, but it suggests that there's more to the story than they were letting on and than we know about. This call left Kimberly feeling uneasy, and she kind of felt like the call had been rehearsed. And that is the reason why she stayed on the phone after Patsy thought she'd hung up. I do believe Kimberly was essentially hit with a gag order, meaning obviously she couldn't speak to anyone about this phone call. And when she could eventually talk to people about this phone call, when all the things went through, the trials and things like that, she was actually never approached to make a statement or anything like that. So the Boulder police arrive at the Ramsey household at 5:59 a.m, which was 3 minutes after putting the phone call down after it ended. So they looked around the house to see whether they could see anything untoward. They checked all around, but they couldn't really find anything. They ended up cordoning off JonBenét's bedroom, but they left the entire house, which was a crime scene, to say the least, open. She had friends over. Like I said, she'd called them, they came over. They were all trampling all over the house. So any potential evidence that could have been in that house was being completely destroyed. They just handled it terribly, the Boulder police. They handled the scene very badly. And they just allowed all of these people to just go everywhere apart from a bedroom. I truly didn't understand this. They handled the scene so poorly. And I feel like it was very detrimental to the case. Yeah, okay, I understand they believed it was a kidnapping. So they were looking more kind of outside rather than in. But nevertheless, there could have still been vital evidence anywhere. What if they dragged her from her bedroom to the living room and they left, I don't know, hair, DNA, fingerprints, anything. They could have left anything there. And they just didn't do anything about it. Because no matter which way you look at it, the house would have been a crime scene. And they just should have taken better care of it, in my opinion. By all accounts, at this point, the Ramseys are obviously the victims and they feel like the daughter has been kidnapped. So the Boulder police are actually informed to treat them, obviously, as victims and not suspects. And when questioning them, not to push too hard because they were upset. But they obviously still need questioning, things like that. Surely they'd want to do anything to try and help the police. So why they said that, I just don't know. Whether it was because of the influence they had and because they were so wealthy, I just don't know. The police went around the house and they ended up in the basement in the wine cellar. Now they couldn't actually get in the door, whether it was locked or, I don't know, blocked by something. They couldn't get in, and so they just thought, hey ho, let's move on. So off it went. Again, they were looking into a kidnapping, so I don't know. They looked at the ransom note, which they sent into the FBI. That put suspicion on the Ramseys immediately. When they read it, it was very, very weird, like I said. And the detective on the scene was actually told to not let the Ramseys out of the sight. But John actually disappeared for, I believe, less than 10 minutes, and then he reappeared again. He stated that he'd gone to his study. Now, nobody knows whether he had gone to his study or whether he went elsewhere. We don't know where he'd gone. So she told kind of her superiors about this, and he told her, to take John on kind of one last sweep of the house, to keep him occupied, to make sure that he didn't wander off again. And that was when John grabbed his friend Fleet and said, oh, we'll look around the house. He kind of went immediately down to the basement, which, bearing in mind the police couldn't get in. He then opened the door. He shouted upstairs, I found JonBenét, her body. He then turned the light on, picked up her body, which was wrapped in a blanket, brought her to the living room where he placed her on the floor. He pulled the duct tape off her mouth and tried to untie her hands. And that just totally blew me away, I'm not going to lie, because he did it in exactly that order. He opened the door and then he shouted that he'd found her body. But he hadn't turned the light on yet. How did he know? How could he, in a wine cellar, bearing in mind which has to be dark because of the wine, so there's no kind of big windows or anything like that letting light in, how could he say for certain, bearing in mind she was also under a blanket, that that was JonBenét's body, without actually having seen it with the light on? Not only that, he then scooped her up, took her upstairs, put her in the living room where everyone had been walking through, put her in this high flow area where all this DNA and things would have been, and he would have just completely contaminated any evidence, DNA, everything that they could have had. Not only that, it was very strange how he put her on the floor. That was his daughter, and yes, okay, she had been killed and obviously she was no longer alive, but surely he'd still have the respect to at least put her on the sofa. I don't know, that's something that crossed my mind. I would have thought that you wouldn't have put her on a cold hard floor. She was his little girl at the end of the day. And I get in a sense that he would want to pick her up and he wouldn't want to see his daughter in such a way, and maybe he would want to try and get the tape off her face and untie her, but at the same time, that's just destroying any evidence that could have been there and could have led to capturing who did this, because to this day we still don't know. I did also read that later on he put a blanket over her, which again, what? Anything that they could have got off her body, he's then putting a blanket on top of her as well. Of course you don't want to see your daughter like that, you just really don't, but you also don't do things like that. Not in an active crime scene. I feel like with how the police handled the scene and how John handled the body, that it was just so detrimental to the case, and that might be the reason as to why we still don't know who did it to this day. Her body went for an autopsy and they determined that her cause of death was found to be asphyxia by strangulation and cranial cerebral trauma. When her body was found, she had this garrote around her neck, and it was actually made from white nylon and a broken up handle of a paintbrush, one of Patsy's paintbrushes. They kind of tied the wood on both ends around the nylon string to kind of make, I guess, handles, making it easier to strangle someone with. She also had the blow to her head, which resulted in a broken skull. They did also find these marks on her lower body that was initially thought to be kind of the prongs of a taser. JonBenét also had duct tape over her mouth and her hands were tied kind of up and behind her head. They found a lot of DNA evidence on her body. They found traces of 2 males and 1 female under her nails and also in her kind of clothing. And they found DNA in her underwear mixed also with blood. They did find that some sources say that she was sexually assaulted and that there was evidence that she had been sexually assaulted over a long period of time. They also found fibres from Patsy's jumper on this duct tape. So even though they had all of this DNA evidence, none matched to any of the Ramseys, any of the Whites, any of the 160 suspects that they actually had. This DNA just didn't assist in the case whatsoever, but they did use it to rule out many potential suspects that would come up later on in this case, and because the DNA didn't match, they just said it wasn't them, it couldn't have been them. And they kind of relied heavily on that DNA to rule these people out. In my mind, whether this DNA could have been tampered with in a sense, like I said, the scene was handled badly. She was put in this high traffic area where other people's DNA had all been in. I don't know how it works in that sense, whether it could have been the sample deteriorated, I don't know. But I do feel like they kind of lent heavily on this DNA and they possibly shouldn't have. It did come out that the DNA, I think they found about several different types of DNA on her underwear, and it was actually believed that these came from kind of her parents not washing the underwear before it was used. So when it was being packaged in the factory, many people have handled it, and that's where this DNA has come from. During the autopsy, they found that her stomach contained pineapple. She'd eaten this in the hours leading up to her death. Photos that had been taken of the home that day show that there was a bowl of pineapple with a spoon hanging out of it on the kitchen side. When the police put this question to the parents, they said that they didn't remember putting out any pineapple or even giving JonBenét any pineapple whatsoever. When this bowl was checked, they found that it had Burke's fingerprint on it. And again, Burke was supposed to have slept the entire time, supposedly. As they did with JonBenét, they kind of took him from the car and he went straight to bed, and he only awoke in the morning when the police shone the light on him, which is when he was quickly ushered out and to the White House. So, where had this pineapple come from, and why did it have Burke's fingerprint on it? And obviously, JonBenét had eaten some of it shortly before she died. So this was kind of information once more leading to the fact that Burke wasn't asleep, possibly wasn't asleep the entire time, like his parents had claimed. I think it prudent as well to mention that the house did have a broken window. I believe John broke it when he forgot his keys one time. But there's also no evidence of anyone getting in through this window. So it was snowing outside, lightly I believe, but still to the point where you would see footprints. There was no footprints anywhere. The house didn't show any signs of being broken into, apart from, as I said, this window which John broke himself. And this window couldn't have really been used to be climbed into because it had a cobweb on the corner, and this cobweb looked old. It was kind of full of dust and things like that, and it hadn't been touched whatsoever. This window was only small, so anyone crawling through it would have disturbed this cobweb, and yet it hadn't. It was still there, so clearly no one had used that window to get it. Now, as soon as the body was found, the Ramseys just stopped cooperating with the police, which I really don't understand. Surely they wanted to find who had done this to the daughter. Surely they'd cooperate as much as they could, because they could have vital information to lead to them finding their daughter's murderer. It was also stated that John, within hours of his daughter being found dead, he called someone and told them to get his plane ready. He actually admitted to this. He said, yes, okay, I did bring them, but it was because I wanted to get away. I wanted to go to Georgia, where JonBenét was born, and kind of be closer to her in that sense. Which, again, the police are going to want to speak to you, obviously. So why are you trying to plan a trip so soon after? I don't know. So, as I said, the family kind of retracted from the police and didn't really do any interviews. Burke was interviewed once, I believe. And he did act a little strange, some people say, but he was also very young. He was 9. And he was always this kind of socially awkward and reclusive boy. So it could have just been a result of that. The family really wasn't questioned thoroughly initially because obviously they were a mess. And then immediately they just lawyered up. It wasn't actually until 5 months later that they allowed themselves to be questioned by the police. And what they actually requested, I found astounding, because they asked for these certain conditions, and one of these conditions was that they had a copy of the initial manuscript of the first interview they did after their daughter had been murdered. Why would you need that, apart from trying to keep your story straight, to try and make sure you say the same things that you said there? Over the years there were a few suspects, and as I said, they were ruled out over this DNA that they had. The case was actually presented to a grand jury that stated they would not file charges against the Ramseys, and they were cleared in 2008. The Whites were actually cleared a total of 3 times, I believe, the first being in 1997, the second time was in 2008, and then again in 2014. So that's all the information we have relating to this case, and now I'm going to go into like the theories and stuff that people believe could have potentially happened. So obviously there's the intruder theory, that somebody became obsessed with JonBenét. She was in pageants, she was dressed up to the nines, she always wore this beautiful makeup and was dressed kind of very provocatively really for a 6-year-old girl. And she was very much in the public eye, everyone knew about her. And so maybe a sexual predator spotted her, obviously found out where she lived with the intent of kidnapping her or murdered her or whatever. They broke into a house and then they ended up killing her. Now there is some evidence against this because, as I said before, there was no evidence that the house had been broken into whatsoever, or that anybody had really been near the house at all. Again, the broken window in the basement, nobody could have gotten in because of this cobweb that hadn't been disturbed. So I don't know how an intruder would have actually gotten into the house. The ransom note is a big thing for me because it was just so strange. I'll put up a picture of the note, the entirety of the note, so you guys can read it for yourselves. But it kind of reads like a movie, doesn't it? And that's because many of the lines from it were from movies such as Dirty Harry and Speed, which I do actually believe they were in the Ramsey household at the time, but obviously many people have the movies and many people have watched them. And I also may be incorrect with that. It could have possibly not been in their house at the time. Like I said as well, they took a really long time and put a really lot of thought into this note, and they didn't even end up taking JonBenét. You took a lot of effort into that note and then you didn't even take her in the end. They killed her. So possibly they wrote this note and then they killed her. But why would you just write a note and then not take her for ransom? And if you had killed her, you wouldn't have wrote the note. And then if you did, say they planned on kidnapping her, they wrote this note and then, I don't know, something went wrong and they killed her. Why would they leave a body in the basement? Because they wanted this money, say. They still had the leverage of getting this money if they had her body. So say they had killed her, her parents wouldn't have known that. They could have taken her body with them and pretended that she was still alive and then still got the money, but they didn't. They left her body in the basement for her parents and the police to find. And I'm not being funny, she was 6 years old. She was a small little girl. She wouldn't have been able to put up much of a fight to the point where if your plan was to kidnap her, that you'd have to kill her because she was, I don't know, struggling too much. She tried to escape. She just wouldn't have been able to kind of do very much, unfortunately. Doesn't really make much sense to me. In my eyes, if you plan on kidnapping someone, you would have brought a pre-made note already. You wouldn't be sitting there for 20 minutes writing out this really, really long note. A couple of times bearing in mind to make sure that you got it right. Obviously, not really worried that anybody was going to come out and find them. Maybe someone went to the toilet and they would have seen them. And if you planned on murdering them, surely they would have taken a murder weapon with them rather than make one at the scene. It's just very strange and it looked really, really staged. Other theories include that John had been sexually assaulting JonBenét over time and that she was finally going to say something about it and he murdered her to cover it up. Who knows? And the other one is this very, very huge cover-up on behalf of the Ramseys. Because this one leads people to believe that Burke, the 9-year-old son, actually killed his sister. Accidentally. So it's theorized that JonBenét had been put to bed. Maybe they got her up to make sure that she went to the toilet because she apparently had a problem with bedwetting and that this problem really, really angered Patsy. So they might have gotten her up so that she went to the toilet so she wouldn't wet the bed. And then possibly she got hungry, so she went downstairs where Burke was sat eating his pineapple. She was hungry, so she ran over. She pinched a piece, putting her fingers in, tormenting him, laughing like siblings do, like your little 6-year-old sister would do, pinch a bit of pineapple off you. And that he got really angry with this and hit her over the head with a torch that was lying on the counter. There are pictures of a torch on the kitchen counter. As I said, the pictures were taken. And the Ramseys claim that this torch wasn't theirs. That they had a similar torch, but this one wasn't it, and they didn't know where it had come from. And it definitely wasn't theirs. Like, at all. Which makes zero sense to me. How does a torch end up in their house and it not be theirs? But anyway, it has been stated that Burke did have these moments of rage where he would lash out at his sister. And on one occasion, the previous year, he actually hit her in the face with a golf club, and he actually left a scar on her face. So it's thought that he grabbed this torch, with it being the closest thing to him, and he hit her with it and killed her accidentally. But there's kind of two theories within that, because one is that Burke did hit her, and that blow kind of killed her, and then her parents, thinking that the son had killed the daughter and not wanting to lose him too, sort of set the scene. They wrote the ransom note, they tied her up, they made the murder weapon, and then they strangled her to hide what the son had done. They didn't want to lose both of the children, and so not knowing what to do, they made it look like somebody broke in and somebody else had done it. The other theory is that actually, yes, Burke did hit her over the head with this torch, but she was still alive. He just knocked her unconscious. The parents once more panicked and set the scene, but this time using the garrote to strangle her to make it look like somebody else had done it. Whoever actually strangled her was the one that actually killed her because she was still alive. Patsy Ramsey did unfortunately die from ovarian cancer at the age of 49 on the 24th of June 2006, which she'd had suffered from previously. There's also a lot of controversy around Burke too. There's been various books and things written over the years, and I'm sure there will be many more written over the years because this case is very well known and there's so many people that still look into it, and there's probably many people who won't actually give up until it is solved. Anyway, one of these books state that a former housekeeper actually said that Burke would smear human feces in JonBenét's room and things like that, and on her Christmas presents, and on her walls, and even in her bed. Obviously, how true this is, I don't know, but I thought I'd put it in anyway because there's a big thing around it that Burke was kind of left in the dark by his parents. He was their son too, and JonBenét got the spotlight, and their dad worked all the time, so he was not there that often anyway. And the mother really concentrated on JonBenét. So poor Burke was left out in the dark, and maybe he was jealous of her because she was this outgoing little girl and she was totally opposite to him. He was kind of an introvert who had no confidence and would often stay inside and things like that, but she was the opposite and she got all this attention and he didn't, and that maybe he acted out as a result of it. I did find as well that when the police cordoned off the room, they did actually find a candy box that JonBenét received for Christmas that apparently had feces smeared on it. Whether this was Burke's or not, I don't know. So growing up, Burke spent his life pretty much introverted. His parents were trying to shield him from the media and all the allegations and things that were going around. And he never really spoke out on the case, and that was until 20 years later when he went on an interview with Dr. Phil. And this was the first interview he'd ever done, apart from kind of the police interview at the time. Now, Burke was smiling through the entire thing, and people kind of believe that that's evidence that he killed her. On the other hand, it could be evidence that he was a very awkward, introverted guy. Even in his adult life, he had a job where he didn't really deal with people. He did it kind of all online. And so people have just put it down that that was his way of dealing being awkward. Now, don't get me wrong, I have seen people, and I have people around me who laugh in situations like that when they feel stressed, and it can look inappropriate. So whether that was why Burke was laughing, I don't know. Personally, I found it really weird to watch it. I don't know, just the smiling when he's talking about his sister's murder just didn't really sit well with me personally. Like I said, I do know people that do things like that, but I don't know. I just found it odd even knowing that. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Burke's guilty and that he did murder his little sister. The fact is, we just don't know what happened that day, and we probably never will. Personally, I don't know who killed JonBenét. There's so many possibilities as to what could have happened that fateful day, and any of the theories I've outlined are possible. But I do also feel that if someone had gotten into the house, that there would kind of be more evidence of that. There was no evidence of a forced entry or anything like that, which I found very odd. On the other hand, if Burke had actually hit JonBenét with the torch and killed her, I don't believe that that would have been deliberate. Like I said, no one knows, and this case is just so sad. A little 6-year-old girl lost her life, and to this day it still remains an unsolved mystery. And we're no closer now to solving it than we were 24 years ago. What do you guys think happened to JonBenét Ramsey? Do you think it was an intruder, or do you think it was a desperate family trying to protect their son? Let me know in the comments below of any of the opinions you guys have. But yeah, if you guys have any more suggestions, please let me know. I'll look into them for you. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of JonBenét Ramsey. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.